Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast is your one-stop shop for fantasy football news and advice. Can't decide on who to draft on the first round? Going gaga on how to line up your team. Got you covered. Traditional League, Dynasty League, PPR League, IDP League, even Daily Fantasy Football League. Join us as we break down all the questions of fantasy football. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Welcome to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, hosted by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am their host every Friday, like always, Ethan Orfe, and we have a plethora of stuff to talk about, the big P's. So we have a good solid 6 segments to go through. Got some Kareem Hunt, some Drew Brees, just some news nuggets. That's where we rapid fire, do some short news stuff that really can't be covered in a long amount of time, but we still try to get over there and cover it. Then talk about some Senior Bowl stock listings. Senior Bowl just happened last week, so we got to see some interesting things transpire within guys moving up and down the ever so changing draft board. And finally, we got some Super Bowl predictions, as the Super Bowl will be this Sunday, and want to talk about some wide receivers at the end of it all. So how about we hop right into this beautiful day? So Kareem Hunt, he can't seem to keep himself out of trouble. So Kareem Hunt recently was stopped by the police for a speeding ticket, and he was only charged for the speeding ticket. However, he was found with marijuana and a opened bottle of vodka in his car, and he said that if he took a drug test, he would have failed. So another off-season issue, another off-the-field issue for Kareem Hunt, and this is not the worst time for him to do that, as he is up for a payday coming up. So what does this really mean for fantasy? Well, we all know his teammate that plays the same position, who people are very high on, in Nick Chubb. He did see a little bit of a decrease when it came to his numbers and touches as the fantasy season continued on after week 8, when Kareem Hunt returned to the football field. Chubbs saw a 3.1 catch per game drop to a 1.4, as Kareem Hunt is a pretty solid pass catching running back out of the backfield, and he has a lot of good skills. And Kareem Hunt was really good his first 2 stints in the league before the video surfaced when he assaulted that woman in that hotel lobby. So it's really it's going to be really interesting how the Browns handle this, because he is a restricted free agent. They have his rights, so if a team bids on him, so to speak, they have the right to match the deal or let him walk. Or what they can do, which is probably what is going to happen, is he'll probably not sign him long term, as in the Browns will probably think about, letting him walk, or potentially sign him to a 1-year deal with a tender, which means that a team can go get him, but they would have to give up a draft pick, and it could either be first, a second, or a third rounder, depending. And by third round, I mean the equivalent round that he was drafted in. So he was a third round pick. Thus, if they do a same round tender, the other team, if they were to pick him up, would have to offer up a third round draft pick to accommodate the Browns. So Cleveland definitely has some options as to how to handle this. And say no one picks up the tender, they can throw out a $2 million contract, 1-year deal. I believe none of the money will be guaranteed. So in reality, this is just another problem on Kareem Hunt's behalf that he can't seem to really get it all together. DUI, which technically it wasn't because he wasn't charged with it, but he essentially admitted to driving under the influence, is not a good look for when you're trying to get paid. And I'm not sure what this means for his career going forward. I believe that he's a really good, talented back, and I think everybody knows that. I don't think the Chiefs really wanted to let him go, but the media, the public opinion, which lays a big factor in how a lot of these decisions are made, the judgment of public opinion changes a lot, so they had to let him go. And I don't believe this will mean the Browns have to let him go, but in the court of public opinion, you never really know how people feel about him. They may think this guy's dead weight. He took too much from Chubb anyway. Focus on the guys that you wanted in-house in the first place, and they may cut him loose, or, they say, this is, you can't compare the two incidents, comparisons. You can't make those, but they'll say this. Some people might say this is worse, or this is less than what he did previously. This is normal, quote unquote. And, you just move on and you do the proper, in-house punishment, in-organization punishment, and keep it pushing. So, you never really know exactly how this sort of thing is looked at within league offices and different organizations. As you know, the Browns have cleaned house in their front office, have a bunch of youth, a bunch of Harvard guys, some Penn State guys. They have a bunch of analytics guys. So I'm sure they're looking into this as an analytical standpoint, what this guy brings to their table for the team, being aside Nick Chubb, and how having these two backs at the same time might be really helpful for someone who's still growing and trying to figure out his place in the league as a quarterback in Baker Mayfield. That might be something that they put into account, and maybe you want to cut their losses and really start fresh and say, we don't want Kareem Hunt to be part of that starting fresh. And, some people have to clean house all the way to be able to get rid of loose baggage. So, as far as Chubb, this was going to be a conversation anyway before this whole incident happened in the first place. But in reality, what will happen to Nick Chubb as Kareem Hunt will, if he stays on the team, he'll probably get more touches as he'll get more familiarized with the offense, with a new offensive coordinator or a new head coach rather. They are going to implement whatever scheme they want to, and that will dictate what happens with Nick Chubb and what happens with Kareem Hunt. If Nick Chubb is not a good pass catcher comparative to Kareem Hunt, you've seen it in the league all over the place where guys end up becoming specialty guys within the running back position as being third down backs because their ability to catch the ball in space, make somebody miss, and pick up good yardage in the screen game. And, of course, Kareem Hunt is a guy who was able to carry the whole load. He wasn't just a guy who was a pass catcher, but he was also someone who could run in between the tackles, do his own stuff. So he's really talented, but Nick Chubb is honestly the better back at this point, or he's better for that team, how the team is constructed, because Cleveland was kind of doing a Moneyball situation way back where they were drafting all these players and trying to make a scheme fit through the draft piece by piece. So it's easy to see that Nick Chubb is good because they designed this offense for it to be good and for it to be successful. So you don't want to break something that doesn't need to be, or you don't want to fix something that's not broken, right? So that's probably one of the reasons why Freddie Kitchens was let go, was because they went away from stuff that was working, like feeding Nick Chubb on multiple occasions in multiple games, and they'd go away from that, or they'd get down big and they'd just abandon the run game completely. And Nick Chubb was cooking for most of the season, and you could see that in the stat sheets and the fantasy scores. Nick Chubb carried a lot of people's teams to their ultimate successes. Some people, he was a league winner in some points of the season, and then other points he kind of teetered off, but we understand his talent. So we'll just have to see in mock drafts how people really view this whole thing, and really just wait and see how it works out in free agency first before we can even really assess the true true level of value per player that both of them are going to be, because I don't even know if Kareem Hunt will end up being a guy that you can say can be a running back number 2 for someone, let alone Nick Chubb get his touches stolen. I don't know which one is more effective for the fantasy player. But we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to get into Drew Brees possibly retiring and just what that means for the grand scope of the Saints' offensive efficiency, their team tactics, and just what are they looking at as far as getting the successor. That's coming up.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So it wouldn't be a true New Orleans offseason without really figuring out what Drew Brees is going to do in said offseason. So this has been kind of how following suit with all the other quarterbacks who are seemingly getting up there in age or has reached past the twilight of their career, and now they're just kind of chasing that last ride. So Drew Brees is up next to bat, as we saw this with Phillip Rivers. We're seeing it with Tom Brady. And Drew Brees is following suit with the idea of a possible retirement. And the front office has already said that if Drew Brees wants to come back, they are happy to re-sign him, and they'll play with him, and they'll stick out with him for the rest of his time as long as he wants to play or he feels comfortable playing. And that's the correct way to look at the situation. But recent reports are saying that Drew Brees it's very possible that he could retire this season and hang it up. And since playing there from 2006 to now, it has been a very, very long time, a lot of success, a lot of failures, a lot of shortcomings, if he does decide to retire. But you have to look at it from the new perspective now, which is the other side of the report, that Sean Payton or the Saints front office or the coaching staff, they look at someone like Taysom Hill as a possible franchise quarterback to replace Drew if he does decide to retire. And that probably just means that Teddy is not going to be a New Orleans Saint next year, no matter what the outcome is, or he might be a backup. But to be honest, if you believe that Taysom Hill is your franchise quarterback, I just find it hard to believe that Teddy Bridgewater is okay sitting behind Taysom Hill when he can really start at some point in this league and somebody else's team. So I would have to believe that Teddy Bridgewater will be on his way out soon. But we saw some things from Taysom Hill, and we watched some stuff from the not championship game, but the playoff game against the Vikings, where he was really getting the ball rolling. He was the only guy really making some stuff happen for that offense, and I'm not sure if that's accounted for just the way the system is designed there in New Orleans, or is it his talent, or is it a mixture of both? I'm not sure. I don't really know who he is as a passer. I feel like somebody who is 30 years old, it's kind of tough to see them as a franchise guy this late in the career. And if he didn't show you something beforehand, why didn't you make him the starter when Teddy came in and Drew Brees went down the first time? If you felt this way in the first place, right? So when you look at it from that perspective, is this all just smoke and mirrors just to make people think about stuff, or maybe to kind of get people to shop around for Teddy and, start sending draft picks and building stock that way? Or maybe they really are just thinking about, or maybe Drew Brees is really thinking about moving on and he's had enough, or, maybe he's had some injuries that he hasn't really talked about, or the zip on the ball isn't coming out the same. There wasn't a lot of questions asked as far as the Pro Bowl for Drew Brees and just how he's feeling about next season, as much as, the really sad story about Kobe Bryant and his daughter happened literally the same time as the Pro Bowl occurred. So it was nobody cared about the Pro Bowl at that moment in time. So, and understandably so, but we didn't really get a lot from Drew. He's saying he's taking his time. He's handling this off season like he does anyone, which he said that he kind of waits till football is done completely for the season before he really gets involved in thinking about what he wants to do for next season and how he processes all that stuff. So he's definitely taking his time, and he's in no rush to make this decision. But you have to think as somebody who's on the Saints offense, there's a lot of changes that are going to be made. There's a lot of people that are going to has to be signed. So Kamara is up for contract. Ryan Ramczyk is up for contract, and Ryan Ramczyk is one of the best O-linemen in the game already. So we know Alvin Kamara had a down year comparatively. He got hurt a little bit, and the touchdown numbers definitely went down. But there is no denying that he's one of the most talented backs in the NFL. So you have to think that they're trying to pay him at some point. And then, of course, they have Marshawn Lattimore. They have to pay him. So anybody from that 2017 class that's still there, they're still probably looking to, to pay them some money. So when you look at it from that perspective, what is the move for them? Maybe they're trying to save money by not signing Drew, or maybe Drew is trying to help them out by saving money, or maybe that's probably why they can't bring Teddy back. Or there's just so many different interesting ideals coming out of this, because of all the people you'd think that if Drew Brees was rumored to retire, who would they be thinking about bringing up as a starter? It'd be Teddy Bridgewater. He went 5-1 as a starter for replacing Drew. And can you really even count the Rams game? Because he didn't plan to go in that game. The game plan was not made for him to succeed in that game, because it was made for Drew. He was the starter. He was probably running, as in Teddy was probably running practice plays, trying to get Drew Brees reps against, or not Drew Brees, but getting the defense reps against what the looks might be for that week. So he wasn't really prepared for that one. So in reality, in my opinion, he went 5-0, and he did his thing, and he definitely proved to the rest of the league that, he's starting caliber. He's a starting caliber quarterback. If Jimmy Garoppolo can go out there and do what he does on a daily basis or a weekly basis, why can't Teddy go out there and do that? If Kirk Cousins can do what he does, Teddy can do what he does. There's a lot of quarterbacks that are not, supreme pocket passers or the most gifted athletes that still get run and still get bumped at the position, especially starting. There's a lot of places that are kind of question marks when it comes to the starting quarterback position. So I'm sure interest will be quite high for him. So you never know. Maybe Denver takes a flyer. Maybe Miami says they want to bring Fitzpatrick back, but they don't really know. You don't know what's going to happen there. Maybe Tampa Bay decides to move on from Jameis, and they go get Teddy Bridgewater. Teddy Bridgewater is a Florida guy, Florida native. So you don't really know exactly where he wants to take his career, but it'll be interesting to continue to follow this up and just to see what's going to happen. I'm not too sure anymore. I thought Drew Brees would come back for at least, one more year, see what he can do, and then probably hang it up do the retirement tour thing, as you know. A lot of guys, that's the one thing. I don't think NFL players really do retirement tours. They kind of just, I think at some point they just realize they're done. And maybe this is the point where Drew Brees thinks that he's done. But we're going to take another break here. And then after that, we're going to get into some news nuggets, some small little tidbits of info that, you know, don't deserve a whole segment, but, you know, they can be put in together as a small package deal. It's like a 6-count nuggets from Chick-fil-A. News nuggets. That's coming up.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, to get into these news nuggets. So, first up to bat, Dak Prescott, quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys, America's team. America's team. Do you believe that? I don't know. I don't know if I believe it either. It's definitely one of the most popular teams in the National Football League, if not the most popular. And he is expecting to get a substantial pay increase this offseason, as he's been telling people, as he believes he'll get a deal done with Dallas soon. And I wouldn't see why that wouldn't be the case. It'll be interesting to see what he does after the deal is made, because I'm pretty sure everybody who likes football or is into football, you know, you would believe that they would keep their franchise guy, as he has proven to be the franchise guy for them. Jerry Jones likes him. The wide receivers like him. Ezekiel Elliott likes him. I don't think anybody has a problem with Dak Prescott as a man. So, and his play on the field, especially this last season, has shown that he can grow as a passer, as a person, as a leader on the field. So, you know, pay him the money. I don't think, the way the season went out last year, where, you know, the first 7 games, people were saying that, you know, Dak is going to get the max. He did the right decision by not signing it, previous off season. And then every other week it was, he'll get the max, or I don't know. I think he might have cost himself some money, because the team wasn't winning as much. And I don't really think, a lot of experts don't believe that, stuff like that really matters for quarterbacks these days. If they know your ability and they know what you can play up to, potential, they gotta secure it. They can't just try and undervalue you, because you'll just walk. And they can't lose a quarterback. You know, you build your system around a quarterback. The quarterbacks are investments for teams. Not to say that other positions are not also investments, but they are the investment. You find yourself a franchise quarterback, you are on the plateau. You're on a different, different stepping stone at that point. You're not a team trying to find its place. You're a team that is trying to now build around the idea of competing for something, instead of trying to find the guy. You're no longer trying to find the guy anymore. So with Dak, you found your guy. So I would assume that the deal would be done soon. I would assume after the Super Bowl, of course, and when free agency finally is underway, then we'll just have to see what happens, because, you know, Amari Cooper has to be paid as well. His free agency is coming up, and we must see what it is that's going to happen. You know, the Cowboys gave up a good amount of picks for him last year. So we can only assume that he's going to want to get paid well, because since he's been their number one target. He's been in and out of the lineup this year or this season just due to injuries, but so has every other wide receiver for the Dallas Cowboys. So I don't know if you can hold that against him. And, there's not as much talent out there on the market as you would think. And they got to strike while the iron is hot. And considering that the NFC East is a very, very competitive league for the most part, as far as how they play each other hard and how, every win counts. You got to have people talented out there to get it done. With that said, though, if you look at other teams in the NFC East, like the Eagles, they made it to the playoffs with a wide receiver core then unlike any other I've ever seen. You never heard of any of those guys out there in my life for the most part, and they still were able to get some stuff done to get themselves in the playoffs. They handled business against the Cowboys in order to put themselves there, and the Cowboys were not able to do that. So sometimes it's personnel, sometimes it's effort and being able to how much you want it. And maybe that's why they had to move on and move in with Mike McCarthy. And who knows what that will do for Dak Prescott's career. All right, finish that nugget. Next nugget, Mitchell Trubisky, the guy who everybody was raving about this offseason just because of the potential of the Bears offense and the Bears team in general. People were saying they're a sleeper playoff pick, potential Super Bowl level defense, and if Mitchell can just be good enough, they can really do some things in the postseason. He did not play that well. The Bears ended up cratering near halfway mark. They kind of figured that with injuries, also with just how defenses tend to look near the middle of the season, either they tend to figure some things out about themselves, or the defense that they showed in the beginning, first 7 games or so, starts to teeter down a bit and comes to more of a reality of what they are rather than what they displayed in the first few weeks, as people start to recognize their tendencies and what they like to do, and they exploit matchups and stuff like that. So Mitchell Trubisky, he had surgery for a partially torn labrum in his left shoulder. That'd be a 2-month recovery. And a lot of people were really high on him in fantasy as well, and it just was not a quality game. Remember, in my fantasy league, guy had Mitchell Trubisky starting over Matt Ryan in game 1. And we were basically clowning this man for doing this because, Matt Ryan is at least a guaranteed 18 points, right? Matt Ryan had one of the worst games I've seen him have for fantasy, literally that game as well, or that week. So it wasn't such a bad start, but, clearly that guy did not win week 1 of the league. But it just goes to show you that Mitchell Trubisky did not have the best season. And for fantasy owners of Mitchell Trubisky, it was really tough. He kind of started to make some things better near the end of the season when things were kind of getting out of reach for playoff potential. So it was more just getting more reps and seeing what he could do. He did get benched at one point, so we really don't know how him and Matt Nagy are going to operate next season. But he might be an interesting guy to look at for our quarterback number 2. Maybe if you run 2 quarterback leagues, or if you just need a solid backup, somebody to look at it, maybe Mitchell Trubisky, because I don't really think anybody wants him to be their starter for the next coming years. And if you're in a dynasty league and you have him, maybe it's time to look elsewhere. Maybe. All right. So, second nugget down. It's getting full over here. Preston Williams, a guy who looked like he was having himself a nice breakout season until he got hurt near the tail end. In 8 games, he acquired almost 500 yards and got 4 touchdowns or something like that. He was looking pretty good. And then he got hurt, but he looks to be ahead of schedule to return. And he's definitely going to be one of those guys he's going to be wide receiver number 2 on that Dolphins team. And if they can figure some things out, if they do draft Tua at their draft position, Miami might be looking at a really, really interesting offensive team. And maybe they should, they did let go of Kenyon Drake. So that running back situation is definitely different than it was previously. But in reality, they look like they're in good shape. They can make some things happen. And being alongside somebody who showed a lot of promise near the end of the season, and Devontae Parker, who went up against Stephon Gilmore and really, really took it to him. You never really know exactly what the deal is with that team, but it looks like they have a lot of talent around. They definitely showed some resolve and some class near the end of the season by not going with the idea of tanking, because the NFL they're not a tanking league, because people put their bodies on the line every day and no money is guaranteed. So I don't think people go out there to intentionally lose games. So I think Miami might be all right. And to just wrap it up, Jamal Adams, he is saying that he wants to be a Jet and he wants to be resigned there. They just recently started talking small conversations, as he put it. When the report came out, he quote tweeted one of the guys who was reporting it and cleared some things up just about how it is. He's being very transparent about how the whole Jets situation is going, especially after what happened during the middle of the season, where the Jets were basically at least answering calls to see guys looking for Jamal Adams, but they were not entertaining them, but they did answer the phone and listen, which is the job of a GM. And if that's the case, then Jamal Adams may need to have another outlook on how business is ran in the NFL. But if they were inquiring other teams, and that's just a whole different story. So we'll just have to wait and see what the deal might be, but he wants to be there for the foreseeable future. All right, so that was your news nuggets. So coming up after this break, we're going to get into the Senior Bowl. So whose stocks are rising, who has fallen a bit, and what to look for. So that'll be coming up right after this break.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
All right, so Senior Bowl stock listings. So everybody and their mom, really, mom, grandma, dog that lived outside, the indoor dog, your cat. Everybody was really high on this Jordan Love guy because of the Mahomes comparisons, the way he can throw the football down the field. This Utah State prospect has really, really gotten people head over heels, and in some of the practices that he did, people were really impressed with him. He had a really good arm, could make all the throws you'd want to see in this sort of setting. So as a first start into, your career as a draftee and, impressing scouts and stuff, this was a good showing for him. During the Senior Bowl, he was okay. He didn't get to show a lot. He didn't get as many opportunities as other quarterbacks did to show their talents and skill sets, so we can only just take what we were given. But he is a guy that a lot of people are going to look at in the draft as a riser, and he may go in the first round, or maybe he might be a late second rounder or early second rounder. I don't know if he goes in the top 10 or anything like that. We may have to wait until his pro day, really, because, the top three are still all Tua, of course, Burrow, and Herbert. That really hasn't changed, and I don't think it will change anytime soon. I think those are the three best in the draft, and those guys are probably going in the top 10 respectively. And then, of course, Jalen Hurts. He had a good practices for the Senior Bowl. A lot of people were really, really high on him as far as being a pro quarterback, as he looked like he could do everything with his legs. He was an elite athlete, running out of the pocket and stuff like that. But what impressed other people was that, he was able to make some reads in practice and do stuff with the football down the field that really was saying that, he should be scouted and critiqued and judged as a quarterback and nothing else, because that's what he's been playing his whole life. So anybody who wants to say, oh, he should switch to wide receiver or running back, no, shouldn't do that. That's not how anything works, really, at all. But I'm not going to go on that tangent again. So let's just go and say he's going to be drafted as a quarterback somewhere, and I'm excited to see what his career path takes from that point there. And his senior bowl performance was not the best. He was kind of just taking one reads and going, and maybe he was just trying to make some things happen, make some exciting plays for himself. But it wasn't as a good passing performance as you'd like to see. So he might have left with a little bit more questions and answers about his game. Something that you would like to see more about and more of, but that's just kind of the nature of Senior Bowl games. You don't get to see people in a full, complete amount of time, and you just have to take that kind of into account as you evaluate all these guys and all the time that they play. Another guy who really made some noise in the Senior Bowl practices and just the game was Van Jefferson, and people were saying he was like Michael Thomas. He was all over the field. He ran the whole route tree. He was breaking down cornerbacks. He was doing it up. I remember this video surfaced, I think that same Saturday, where, he was just dogging dudes, in one-on-one drills and doing comeback routes and 10-yard outs and slants and double moves. He was just all over the place. So, his draft stock is probably going to rise. And if he has a really good combine, if he decides to go, man, the sky's the limit with this guy. Maybe he might be one of those guys you didn't really hear about, because Florida has had their quarterback troubles and they've really struggled in that department in recent time. But if you know anybody from Florida, a lot of guys say he was always a stud, and they just didn't get the most out of him. But he's definitely going to be one of the highly looked at wide receivers in this draft, as it is loaded at wide receiver apparently this year. So I'm sure there's a lot of teams that are going to be looking for some wide receivers, like the Patriots or the Saints or anybody, Pittsburgh. There's going to be a lot of guys looking at wide receivers this year, and just to, you can never have too many good weapons out there on the outside. Justin Herbert, he had a pretty interesting day as the Senior Bowl went on. He didn't, he didn't do anything to really set him apart from what people already know him to be, but he didn't do anything to damage his draft stock. Threw that really nice screen pass, which kind of bloated up his stats. But other than that, he was a Justin Herbert day, and that was kind of all she wrote on that. So really, the Senior Bowl is just the start of guys who didn't decide to leave early. So it was their last ride, last time in college doing anything for collegiate play. Now they're focused solely on their professional careers, so it's more power to them. They get to do what they what they've always dreamed. They get to go to the draft. They get to go through all these workouts, get wined and dined by teams maybe. I don't know. Picked apart. I heard the draft, the questions they ask these guys are really, really like psychoanalyzing what these guys are. So I'm always interested to hear how the draft process goes. So I'll be looking a little bit deeper into just what they ask them, what they think about prospects, how they think about prospects, because, you know, there are investments in people, especially quarterbacks. You probably really, really get involved in quarterbacks, and there's probably more than just, you know, what John Gruden used to do with the Y2 split banana and all that stuff, you know, asking them about plays, but about their personalities, how they operate under pressure, what if there's turmoil in the locker room, what do they do? Can they be a leader? Are they a vocal leader? Are they somebody who just leads on the field, or are they a guy who just goes with the flow? You know, a lot of people want a certain fit for a quarterback and how they feel about how they handle certain situations. So you know, that has to be taken into account. And then for other positions, you know, what do you want out of a guy? Like, maybe you need somebody with an edge at wide receiver, but everybody tries to put on their best face in the draft. You know, you don't want to come off as a guy who's not grateful to be where they're at. And, you know, you want to impress people for your skill, but you also know who you are. If you're a guy that believes in themselves and is very confident in their abilities, you want to, you know, you don't want to just, I guess, you know, hide beneath your coattails or stuff like that. You're going to puff out your chest and say, I'm the best guy in this draft, and you're going to want to take me. You're not going to say, oh, you know, I'm just here to win, and I want to win, and whoever takes me, but, or, you know, that guy's an animal, he might be better than me. No one ever says that in the draft. Everyone thinks they're the best thing since sliced bread, since, you can't say that. You know, everybody's confident. That's the thing. Everybody has an edge in the NFL if you make it there. You just can't, it's just too hard of a sport. There's too many guys in there to not have an edge, especially at the wide receiver position. Or a cornerback, that's a really, really edgy, chip on your shoulder kind of two positions right there. You kind of always have to have it, or else, you know, you feel like people will walk all over you, or you won't get looks, or people will think that you're easy to go against. Everybody kind of has to have that edge. So, it'll be interesting to see how guys really are evaluated as far as, you know, their mental things and abilities and intangibles and stuff like that. So I'm curious to see how that's all going to go. But we're going to take another break, and then I'm going to get into my Super Bowl predictions, as the Super Bowl is coming up on Sunday, and I'm excited to watch it and see what exactly is going to transpire. So that's coming up.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
All right, so Super Bowl Sunday. It's happening on Sunday, people. So what is Ethan's pick? Who is Ethan picking for the Super Bowl? Well, it's been a lot of head turning, a lot of decision making, a lot of scratching off the paper, coin flipping, asking Siri to flip the coin, and I've made my decision. If you listen to the GSMC football podcast, I've already mentioned it, but if you don't, here it is again. I'm picking the Kansas City Chiefs just because of the pure level of offensive onslaught that they could put on somebody. They have reached a pinnacle of offensive performance that they were at last year. They have hit a stride during the playoffs that normally when you look at people and you look at people's teams, right? You look at teams, you look at personnel, and you wonder who has the hot hand. Who is going to be the guy that you feel, who has the momentum going in? Of course, we know what the 49ers have done in the playoffs as well. Their defense has really picked it up. They look a little bit healthier. George Kittle is a man amongst boys. We know this. They block like no other team blocks in the NFL. We know this. Their defense flies after Joey Bosa, D Ford. We know what they do, right? But let me tell you something. This Kansas City Chiefs team is more than on fire. They are set ablaze. You can't breathe. It is smoke in the house. You can't see. You can't get out the house because they're so on fire. They just keep throwing touchdowns. You pour water on it, it's not a water fire. It's a gas fire. Big fire. Boom. All right. So anyway, the Chiefs are really good. And they were good beforehand. A lot of people picked them to be Super Bowl contenders and to win the Super Bowl this year. Then Mahomes got hurt. Then Tyreek got hurt. And then we just started to see people, the team started to teeter in the wrong direction. Their defense was not good, even though the sack numbers last year, they're lower than what it is this year. Or the sack numbers are lower this year than they were last year. But you got to remember last year, a lot of teams were playing from behind because they were so dominant offensively. So the sacks numbers just kept coming. So, their defense arguably is better than what it was last year. So, Tyrann Mathieu, when you look at Chris Jones, and you see all these guys really coming together and figuring things out, really playing for each other and knowing what the last goal is, and you just think of the storylines of around this Chiefs team really is, it's been X amount of years since they've been there. Andy Reid, is it finally his time to really cement himself and, win for his legacy and really think about it from that perspective? And when I look at it from that perspective, then, maybe it is time for Andy Reid to win. And that's not really putting a lot into account for why I think they're going to win. It's more about the players on the field. So let's get into who I think is going to be the MVP of the Super Bowl and fantasy MVP. If you plan to play some daily fantasy, which is what we always support here, is to play fantasy at any time that you feel necessary. So I don't know if I'll be playing daily fantasy for the Super Bowl. Sometimes I just like to watch and enjoy, and I like the Super Bowl enough to where I don't feel like, putting investment on those games is worth the enjoyment of me watching them sometimes. So I might just sit this one out because, I gotta get it in different ways, gotta get some wings in. I don't know if I'll be partaking in the beverages. Remember, guys, just a side note, if you're gonna drink responsibly, and drink water on the side too, because a lot of food. Sometimes you don't want to put a lot of food and liquor in your body at the same time. But back to the regular scheduled programming. I think it's pretty easy to pick Pat Mahomes as the possible Super Bowl MVP. He is their leading quarterback. He is the franchise guy. He is their best player by far, and he is their leader. On offense, defense, it doesn't matter. He is their leader. He keeps people together. He talks all the time on the sideline. You don't see him stressing out there when his team is down 24 points. You don't see him stressing when he's down 17-7. He figures it out, and he knows how. He's figured out what it takes to win, I believe. And I think last year really played a big point. And even last year, I don't even think how some people say that, that guy didn't lose because he didn't get to play in overtime. So can you say really that Mahomes lost? If your team loses, you lose. But did he lose? Was maybe this confidence was always there, and we didn't get to see it fully flourish just because his playoff run was stopped short by the Patriots. So there is nothing stopping him from being that guy in the Super Bowl right now. And I think he understands the moment. I think he grasps the moment. And I think, he's just he's a good player. And good players make big plays, especially at the biggest moment. So I'm really, really interested to see exactly what he's going to do. And I feel like he's going to have a few big moments. The Chiefs offense, when you look at it on paper, is so fast. We understand that the 49ers defense is fast too, but you have the best, I've been saying this for a few weeks now. They have the best deep threat in football, right? And Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill has been quoted to say he wants to try out for the Olympic team. For track and field. Fastest deep threat in the league, right? May have the second fastest deep threat in the league right next to him in McCole Hardman. 2 speed demons back there just running, destroying defensive coverages. You have to pay attention to both of them. Man beaters. You can't really play man on them that much or else they will kill you. Then they have Damian Williams coming out the backfield who can catch, run in the middle, run in between tackles, zone runs, tosses. Then you have folks like Sammy Watkins who, sometimes he disappears. Like he didn't have a really good game really for the remainder of the season after week 1 until he came up in the playoffs against the Titans, where he really showed up and he really did some things, and people say, oh man, they have Sammy Watkins too. And then you remember, oh my gosh, who's in the middle? Travis Kelce, the best receiving tight end in the game. How do you stop that? Then you have Mahomes. Can you touch him? I mean, you can try and pressure him, but his pocket mobility is really good, and he can move, he can run, he can pick up some yardage, he can get out of bounds, and he can keep drives going with his legs. So their offense is so potent, and I just don't think that the 49ers can keep up if they have to stop them every single time. I mean, that's the point, but realistically, if let's say the Chiefs go up 14-0 against the 49ers. Now, the Chiefs defense is not the best, but they're good enough to know that the 49ers are all about, being balanced, but they do like to run the football and stick to their game plan. If they stop that run and force Garoppolo to throw some things, they know they can get one back. They know they can get the ball back from Garoppolo because he's only been able to really showcase he can throw the ball in one game against the Saints. Any other time it's been, he can do some things, but if you put some pressure on him, he can make mistakes. I just don't see the 49ers really being able to last in a shootout with the Kansas City Chiefs, Mahomes, the guys that went and dropped 52 in 3 quarters against the Texans, right? They dropped 50 big bombs. Went and put up like 35 against the Titans after being down 17, or they were down 10 in the first, almost really till halftime. And then Mahomes went and scored near the end, and they ended up being on top. The Chiefs are not afraid of any lead. No lead is safe. They are the Golden State Warriors in football. Pat Mahomes is the Steph Curry of football. Revolutionizing the game right now. The way he played last season was Steph Curry-esque, in my opinion. And this season has been a little bit kind of like, his play never really went down because of him. It was more due to injury, and then team chemistry was off, but then they slowly started building back up and building back up and building back up to be better. And now they have reached the pinnacle of the sport, and I believe they're going to win it. So I have the Chiefs going in there and winning in Miami. There it is. And I have Mahomes as the MVP. Mark it. All right. So I'm going to take my final break here, and then we're going to talk about who are the best wide receivers in the NFL, according to me, not any other list, just off of how I feel about how they play the game.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
All right, so for my last segment, I wanted to look at the wide receivers this year and really talk about, because wide receivers were really shaking up as far as who is the best, who have been the best this season, what have they been doing, who are the best 5, best 10, who really has had a phenomenal season, and who should be rewarded as being put into these top 10, top 5 lists, the rankings, all that stuff. So, this is no in particular order. It's kind of, at a certain point, you get to a level where, guys can reach a level that, is uncomparable. And then, there's everybody else. And these guys they can push themselves to different levels during different parts of games to where you go from game to game switching who are the best, So, first guy, I have 6 people, by the way, 6 people on this list because, you can interchange the last 2, whatever, because, they're not rankings, but they are on the same team. So I guess I should get them out the way. Chris Godwin or Mike Evans, because they literally are the epitome of a flip-flop guy. If one game Chris Evans is going off, Chris Godwin is going off. Mike Evans is he's not having as good of a game, but his impact is still there. If Mike Evans is going off, Chris Godwin is probably not having the best statistical game, but his impact is still there. These guys impact, defenses in ways that you wouldn't be able to believe. That Tampa team is so talented, like from top to bottom, so talented. If, 30 interceptions didn't happen, they're probably a playoff team. I don't know how far they go, but they're talented enough. They were talented enough to be in the playoffs last year. And, from turnovers to decision making on the field, just how some games didn't go their way, or, they threw themselves out of some games. They definitely had the talent to be where other teams were. So, yeah, Chris Godwin, the route running ability. Mike Evans is being stronger than everybody else on the field and able to really, really get at people, get up, get jump balls. Those two are really, really top class at the position. I can't wait to see what they do next year, especially in a division that seems to be forever changing. Not everybody. It's hard to be at the top in the NFC South for a long time, and they always change power. Power always switches. You never know who's really going to be the best at where they're at. So that's those 2. Let's go with Davante Adams. I always like to look at guys who demand so much attention to them. If somebody has the game plan against you, like you specifically, to stop you and get everybody else, it's kind of like in basketball where it's like anybody but him, right? You double that guy. You make him give up the ball. Well, A-Rod's the one throwing Davante Adams the ball, but essentially you double him. You give more attention to him on his side of the field and make somebody else beat you. Davante Adams does that, and he still gets the ball. Sometimes it's scheme or whatever, but he is a Swiss Army knife of a wide receiver. He's still underrated in my opinion. I feel like he's really good, and a lot of people sleep on him. He's been a fantasy stud for the last 3 years. He's done it with A-Rod, without A-Rod. He is a really, really quality wide receiver, and I think he belongs in the top 5 conversation for sure. Just off his work ethic and talent alone, he is Davante Adams. You're that guy. I like Davante. Another D guy. Another is DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins is, I don't even know how to describe him. he grabs the ball. He can make the big time catches, the catches in traffic. He doesn't drop balls very often. He has the speed, the quickness. He can run routes. He breaks people's ankles literally. Like nobody will ever forget that day, that practice where he, who was it? Somebody on the Redskins. I can't even remember which player it was off the top of my head, but, he broke his ankles. Literally had to be taken out of practice, and he was hurt for a portion of the season because DeAndre Hopkins ran a route so nasty that he was done. And then the legend of DeAndre Hopkins was really born at that point. You know, he's really good in traffic, in space, a touchdown machine, Deshaun's favorite target by far. And it's by no question, you know, he's really talented and really can get things going. Duke, or Nuke, rather. You ever played Duke Nukem before? That's an interesting game. But, it always reminds me of it when I see his nickname. But the Nuke man, big dude, DeAndre Hopkins is just phenomenal player. So, moving on. This is another guy I didn't realize I had so many NFC South guys, but the NFC South is loaded with wide receivers. So, I don't feel bad for doing this, but Julio Jones is still one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, and Falcons fans will fight to the tooth and nail to say he is the best and has been the best for a very long time because they're go-to card. Because I have to talk to Falcons fans quite a lot because I do live in Atlanta, live in the area. So when somebody with that hat with a bird on it comes up, starts talking football with me, of course, I listen. And, you know, sometimes they have good takes, sometimes they have bad. But one of the takes that they have all the time about Julio is that whenever you put him on a list of saying who are the best two wide receivers, it's always somebody else and Julio. Then next year, somebody else and Julio. Then the next year, it's somebody else, then Julio. At some point, maybe the one that's always up there is the guy who's the best. That's really a hard argument to not, you know, it's hard to argue against that. It's hard to argue against that idea. And I definitely recognize he's all about business. He is a guy that gets double teamed, triple teamed before. And, you know, the touchdown numbers aren't always there. The fantasy numbers aren't always there from the stats. But Julio is by far one of the most talented guys I've ever seen touch a football. As a guy who's a fan of a team in the same division, I fear Julio Jones going off. I don't want anybody else to do anything else. Julio Jones. Julio Jones is he's so good. He's just so good. You just don't want him to take over the game, because if he takes over the game, then it's over with for you. Then everybody's involved. Julio's kind of taking, he kind of does he has a little bit of the Kobeism in him. Like the late Kobe. The 2010s and above Kobe, where, you know, he's not the guy, but, you know, he is the guy. So the stats may not show it, but, you know, he is the guy you have to worry about day in and day out. All right. So finally, the last guy, of course, is Michael Thomas, the stat getter, the guy who doesn't drop passes, the 10-yard plus guy. He just doesn't drop the ball. His route running is supremely undervalued and underrated. He's not the fastest, but his hands are, you know, almost guaranteed cash back. You know, if he drops the ball, you get your money back almost. That's how guaranteed his hands are. There's really not much else to say. His yardage, the yards he acquired, the number of catches he had this season are astronomical. He's breaking records or close to records in his fourth season that were made in people's fifth. So what more do you have to say? He's one of the best. But those are my top 5/6 receivers in the NFL this season. Interesting. Some honorary mentions. Tyreek Hill, he is a guy that is just a speed demon, but, you know, I don't feel like he can run all the routes. I I like Keenan Allen, but he hasn't been on the field as much, and sometimes it can be quite inconsistent at times. And then, of course, I think Juju had just a really down year altogether. And then, Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper can get some things when he's healthy on the floor or on the field. So that is my list, and that will wrap up the podcast. I hope you all enjoy listening. I enjoyed speaking with you guys. So once again, every Friday, like usual, GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Please remember to rate and review us on any app that you listen to the show. So 5 stars, and don't forget to follow us on our social media, so our Facebook, our Instagram, and our Twitter. This is Ethan for the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, and I hope you have an excellent day, an excellent Super Bowl, and I'll see you all next time.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.